Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back. So we heard from Fleetwood Grobler, CEO of Sasol. He's quite bullish about Sasol's journey to green hydrogen, the role it can play. And obviously that is within the context of South Africa and the challenges and opportunities, natural endowment that the country present to the. And I think when we started researching the space, obviously there are lots of vested interest, there are lots of perspectives, almost lobbying perspectives. And yet we found that there are also true expertise who stands above all of this and guide conversations. So when we got to our next keynote speaker, and he accepted our invitation, we felt really privileged to have an input which isn't in the politics of the day or the it's in the reality of the day, but not in the lobbying positions of the day. So in South Africa, we mispronounce people's name before it's Italian. So Giacomo Chiavari, I'm not going to allow you to mispronounce my name in return. He is the strategy leader at EY-Parthenon, based in Italy. What an absolute privilege to have you with us. I've got a question to the audience, a poll question, and we'll come back to this at the end of the session. I'm looking for my own poll question. I tell you what, let's rather carry on. I'll put the poll question at the end. Sorry, I have dropped a piece of paper, and that's the critical one. Let's not mess about any further. You see, I've made it comfortable for you to mess up, make mistakes, bumble. You can never be worse than me. So I've lowered the base so good, so well that you can feel very comfortable. Thank you very much for your input and your presentation. Please proceed, and I'll join you later for the Q&A. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, it's my privilege to be with you and to talk about this important topic. A few words about myself before jumping into the topic. I'm Giacomo Chiavari, partner in the Milan office, leading the European energy and resources sector within EY-Parthenon. And of course, I had the privilege to work on hydrogen projects in several occasions with different clients and different perspectives. And therefore, I developed some knowledge that I'm happy to share in this short session. Let me put in presentation the material I prepared so that we can go through it. I hope that you are able to see it. So first of all,
thank you. Yeah, it's very good.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you very much. So a few words about the understanding of the environment. Obviously, a very high-level introduction that probably is well known to most of you, but just to be all on the same page. Hydrogen has been a gas, a vector that has been in place for several years and is not a new topic, is not something that was not before, but there was a way to produce and to take it to the application that was quite full of carbon in its value chain, and there are opportunities that are all going hand in hand with decarbonization. So let's start from the left-hand side. We are talking about gray hydrogen. It starts from fossil fuels and usually from steam reformation or partial oxidation. Hydrogen was taken out from the fossil fuels and introduced to the different application that actually was, in most cases, one, the industry feedstock for those that were needing hydrogen for his chemical reactions. The solution in order to go toward decarbonization are many, and we can see first of all the conversion into blue, still on the left-hand side. That means adding the carbon capture and storage activity in the value chain in order to take the carbon, bring the carbon not to the environment, but storing it in order to minimize the impact for the environment. But a completely different technology and value chain comes with the green hydrogen. That is the one that we are going to discuss today. That is using green electricity, converting with electrolyzers, and bringing to different applications. This is again a technology that is not recently developed or new, but the reason why we are talking today is that the economical, the competitiveness of this solution from an economic perspective against the gray is slowing, converging, and therefore there are reasons to say, why don't we use hydrogen with a green production instead than the gray, now that the delta, or in the near future, the delta will be smaller and smaller. Finally, on the right-hand side, there are also other applications that are similar in terms of technology, but instead of using fossil fuels, are using bi-fossil fuels like biomethane. Using biomethane coming from, for example, waste allows to produce the same hydrogen with no additional emissions and gases into the environment. And this is another solution that is not yet totally competitive, but we need to take into the radar screen. But now that green hydrogen is introduced, why is it that appealing? First of all, because there is an infinite resource. We don't need to talk like in oil, how many years of reservoir we are available in order to sustain the development and of this technology and of this solution. It comes from solar, wind, water, all things that are quite available in our world. The second is that is an application that doesn't produce any emission when is converted, is in most cases is an energy vector that needs a conversion, but we know that gas, we know that oil, we know that coal, when it is burned or applied, it generates CO2. In these cases, we are talking about zero emission. But the interesting part is that compared to gray hydrogen that has these second features, as we said, also when it is produced, it doesn't generate any emission. The issue, otherwise we would not talk about a new topic, but quite a well spread and developed solution, is that the differences in the production cost are extremely high. We are comparing green hydrogen production cost with natural gas applications, even in different solutions, and including also transportation and distribution cost, or with gray hydrogen, that is for those that are using hydrogen as a feedstock, is a natural, is the current solution in place. We can see that there are still big differences. As I mentioned, the trend is going in the right direction, but probably without any incentive or support, convergence, natural convergence and parity won't be reached before 2030. Despite these quite impactful information that the delta are big, and partially because people are expecting subsidies and support in order to accelerate this new opportunity, as we have seen 20 years ago with renewables, or many years ago with renewables, there is a huge disproportion between what is currently installed as green hydrogen production and capacity versus the announced projects around the world. We see more than 200 times bigger. This means that we are really at the turning point of this technology because the opportunities are becoming, in terms of both technology maturity, but also cost competitiveness, are getting closer and closer and more material. People are believing that it's coming the right time to think about that and to invest in this technology. When we talk about investing, I'm just putting some numbers, and these are related to the European, but in a second we are going to convert it into the worldwide and even to the African opportunities. If the 40 gigawatt that are expecting 2030 in Europe will be realized, the implication for the economy are going to be very high. We are talking about an investment plan that goes between the 30 and the $50 billion The reason why the range is that large is that there are, as I said before, big expectation of lowering cost of the technology within the next 10 years, and therefore is important to understand how fast will be this lowering and when people will invest, because in 5 or 10 years prices will be extremely different compared to today. And another interesting application, that in order to provide green energy for those 40 gigawatt, usually the conversion rate is 1 to 2, maximum 1 to 3. And this implies that we need additional green energy resource, and therefore PV and wind farm equivalent to 80 gigawatt to 120 gigawatt. That means almost 250 billion to $400 billion invested in the next 10 years. So for Europe, and we will convert it into the worldwide numbers rapidly, is an enormous opportunity in order to convert its generation and energy mix into a greener one. We said that there are many projects, and actually this is a mix of 340 H2 related projects around the world. We see that there is a strong concentration around 70% in Europe and Russia. The reason of that is one of the countries that is taking a bigger commitment in terms of support to the hydrogen opportunity in the near term, and therefore there is a fast run. North America up to a few years ago was more skeptical, and here we see the implication, but we see also Africa and Asia Pacific with quite an interesting number, above 10% of the worldwide mix. And this is an opportunity, first of all, for every country in order to convert its energy mix, but also for the northern part of Africa in order to become a generator of this energy vector to be exported as well. We wanted to talk about also figures. So as I said before, we mentioned 40 gigawatts for Europe. We are estimating 140 to 150 gigawatt installed around the world, with quite a balanced mix. We see that Africa is anyway more than 20% of that is expected to be installed in Africa, both, as I said, for internal usage and for export. And in terms of application, and in the next slide, we are going to spend a little bit more time in application, we can see quite a balanced mix. Let's keep in mind that for the time being, there is a single application that is consuming the whole production of gray hydrogen, that is industrial feedstock. And instead, we are expecting many new applications to come and to contribute to the explosion of this development of the technology. I would like, as I said, to spend a little bit more time on the application, because we said that up to now, hydrogen and gray hydrogen is mainly used for as a chemical element, as a feedstock for conversion. The most known one are the refineries, where there is, for hydrocracking, hydrogen is used to make some conversion of the production of the diesel and gasoline. At the same time, for some chemical reaction after the production, steel as well is a sector in which hydrogen is used. Production of ammonia and fertilizers is another one. So industrial application in terms of feedstock is the current, is the status quo of the hydrogen sector. But as said, there are opportunities to apply hydrogen in new sectors. One, of course, is transportation. We know that we need to find new solutions to switch diesel and gasoline in the near term. There are countries and regions that are already taking this commitment. Of course, there is electricity and e-mobility. Of course, there is LNG for trucks, but these are solutions that are anyway taking a little bit or some carbon into the value chain. If we are able to find economical solution with hydrogen, this is an opportunity to have a full decarbonization within the transportation. Others are residential and commercial, so bringing an energy vector able to generate at the same time heat and power for residential and commercial. Of course, there is the CHP technology that is well spread, particularly in commercial. Anyway, is not a fully decarbonized solution, and therefore in the maybe not near, but future or long future, there will be the opportunity to switch this technology into something that is completely green. And finally, as said, power generation, we know that of course there are renewable energies, and therefore it's important to understand why to take the electricity up to hydrogen and back to electricity, whether this from an engineering perspective makes sense, but still is an opportunity for the situation in which we need storage and we need to provide energy with a different balance, particularly useful for renewables, and we know that in South Africa there are many of those, in order to balance the production flow of these plants in a way that matches better with the consumption of the country, and therefore leveraging also better prices because of energy storage. Hydrogen is particularly useful for long-term storage. For the short-term storage, actually there are batteries as a better opportunities, but anyway, a new opportunity to store energy. And if a point that is important to explain to you is that these four industries may use hydrogen in different ways. I already explained the feedstock, and therefore as a gas, as a chemical element. A second point is hydrogen can be a vector when you need energy in terms of electricity, because it comes from electricity, but converted with the fuel cell, it goes back to produce an electricity, and therefore there are a number of applications for that. And of course, transportation is one of those, but in some situation there is also the opportunity of generating electricity as a backup power or the centralized generation for the industrial sites. In some cases now technologies are others, but hydrogen will be for sure a natural substitute of those. And then when you need thermal energy and therefore heat, because instead of being put into a fuel cell, it can be burnt as well as gas is done right now. And it allows to reach very high temperature that sometimes the electricity is not able to reach. So if you want decarbonization when you need high temperature, hydrogen is a potential. I just accelerate a bit in order to stick with time. There are a number of drivers that helps to make the path that we have mentioned at the beginning from being extremely expensive into the convergence and to the parity. First, a continuous decrease of the cost of renewable energy that is happening and will continue to happen. The same for technology. Right now we are slightly below 1,000 euro per kilowatt, but expectations are even below 300 euro per kilowatt in 10 years from now. Business model, and we are going to spend 1 minute of that in the next slide. And of course, GHG emission cost, because CO2 cost is increasing for companies because of the certificates and the CO2 emissions, and therefore this is supporting the convergence. Particularly important also to look at the location in which the local enablers that are how much we have local supports that accelerate the coverage of the delta, the renewable energy sources availability in terms of amount of energy to reach, infrastructure in order to distribute this gas, and of course local industrial landscape, and therefore how many people are already asking for H2. One focus on business model, just to close, that is there are players thinking on three different ways. One is it's important to generate hydrogen close to consumption, the on-site production, decreasing having maybe higher cost, but limiting a lot the cost of transportation. The opposite is let's generate offsite large production and let's generate pipelines or trucks for transportation. Both of them have very big pros and cons. Something that is taken care as an intermediate solution, quite appealing from a cost-benefit analysis, is generating some districts with one place close to consumption, but to a broader area with some dedicated pipelines in order to connect them. Bernard, just last slide, and I promise I close. I see that I've taken a couple of minutes from the question session. Just few reminders from you that I hope in my presentation I made clear. What are the factors that can and will support the acceleration of the conversions between green, hydrogen, and the alternatives? Cost reduction of all the components, development of infrastructure based on the business model in place, regulation and incentives in order to cover it for the next 10 years, the delta that technology is not able to balance, supply chain in order to have all the technologies converted into hydrogen ready and available, and finally, a communication campaign in order to take all the people on the industrial side available and aware of this solution in order to accelerate the conversion and penetration. I hope that you found interesting and useful these few slides and these few insights, and I'm happy and available to discuss with you any question.
Thank you, Giacomo. I can safely predict, looking at 100 sort of attendees being directors, senior executives of South African companies, mainly Southern African companies, I think some of your slides are going to make it to boardroom presentations to show how clever we suddenly are in this space. And you know what happens after that? They'll contact you for the nuances, the detail, and how does it work. So audience, the slides will be available, but ultimately beyond the slides is deep understanding, which is what you will have to pick up the phone to Giacomo to. I want to quickly run the two polls that I couldn't find earlier. And so to the audience, Giacomo, you and I can't participate, so we are the victims of democracy here. We just see what other people say. My first poll, they're two similar questions. The first one is, over what time horizon do you think hydrogen will be a significant contributor to the world's, and I say energy supply, but to the world? Over what time horizon? Option one is soon, and in my definition of soon is 1 to 5 years, even in my lifetime as an old man. Option two is later, somewhere beyond 5 years. And option three is never. So do you think this will contribute soon, later, or never? And then whilst I start, I will leave this up for a minute or so. And then whilst I'm engaging with Giacomo, we will also run a second poll. So see when the second one comes up. It's the same question. But now I'm asking, over what time horizon do you think hydrogen will be a significant contributor to South Africa's energy supply? So the one was for the world, and the other one is for South Africa specific. So let's see what the audience say. Can I quickly go on your slide 10? And I mean, these are spectacular slides, simplifying it for those of us who haven't grown up in this sort of field. But on slide 10, you've got a heading that says KSF at global level. What does KSF stand for? We don't have to go back. Oh, thank you for going back. Sorry, this is an ignorant question, but just so that I don't lose meaning. What does KSF stand for? KSF at global level. And you are muted. You know, the rules here in South Africa is you owe me a bottle of Italian wine for being muted. Huh? It's the pandemic rules here locally. We can't buy wine, so we have to extort it from our presenter. So what is KSF?
You are perfectly right. And this is the typical mistakes of consultants to give for granted the acronym. KSF stands for Key Success Factors. Therefore, the factors that will contribute to the success of this solution.
And if we interpret the slide for South Africa, and I'm not expecting you to be a South African expert, we're going to go into South African specific things. Fleetwood Grobler shared with us that as the CEO of Sasol, he it's got technology, it's got this. We know we don't have gas infrastructure in the country, compared to Europe, or access to gas. We are fighting good fights about should we have carbon tax or not, etc. Your outside perspective, what do we have as a country that you think should as a player potentially, even if it's just regional in South Africa?
So I would say, based on my limited exposure to South African features, I'm aware that it is a country with a huge potential from renewables. I know that many European and international companies are participating to tenders in order to take their share of the development opportunities within the renewable space. Therefore, point number one, that means having a large amount of competitive green energy is for sure one of the big pros of South Africa. The technology is important to be aware that local production is anyway something in which many countries are asking, but I'm also aware that South Africa is extremely careful on local content, and therefore bringing an opportunity and asking players to also develop the technology locally is something that can take place. The third part is, I would say, the infrastructure, and this is, I would probably say 2 points. One is large production points are supporting better economics, so it's important to have quite a big size of local demand in order to generate big production sites and therefore good economics. And but I would say there are a number of industrial applications that are quite rich in the country that can generate this demand and make the conversion. So all in all, I see very good starting point for the country to go into that direction. Of course, also how bad is your energy mix in order to benefit from the conversion is another point. And it seems to me that it's not that bad because there is already quite green energy is already well established. But these are just few insights from a person that is not expert, and therefore I may be wrong.
Thank you. That was based on a question from Lael Bethlehem, which I just sort of paraphrased. I'm waiting to share the audience's poll results with us, so we can talk a little bit about that. Vuzi Kumalo asked a question which may or may not be a space you're comfortable to comment. What is the estimated renewable energy mix globally by 2030 and 2050? Now, obviously, worldwide institutions have just published this sort of view on that. But from your perspective, and perhaps hydrogen specific, how do you see hydrogen shorter term 2030, longer term 2050 contribute, Giacomo?
Just to clarify, the question was about energy mix or electricity mix?
No, and renewable energy mix was the specific question.
Okay, because in terms of renewable energy mix, I would say, despite the fact that PV and wind have been installed and are quite mature technology, people may expect to have new ones to come into the arena and contribute and make a similar path of what photovoltaic and wind made in the last years. Based on my exposure to many players that are investing in renewables, there is still a very strong focus on these two technologies, and there are no technologies that are in the turning point of becoming mature and as competitive. The only one I would include is offshore wind that is making this step into competitiveness, and that's it. There may be biomass, but still yet. Others are solar concentration, so other technologies are not showing the same path and the same speedness of decrease of LCOE that these technologies are showing. And therefore, I would say at least for 2030, I would not expect a mix that takes many new technology into that. A stronger weight of solar that is having an extremely rapid pace, and a constant contribution from wind. Hydro has been taken already in the past, and I would not expect a bigger step up from hydro technology.
So the question I asked the audience, over what time horizon do you think hydrogen will be a significant contributor? I asked about the world, for the world and for South Africa. The answers are very similar. A low percentage, less than 15 or 15 odd percent, says not soon. In other words, not yet in the next 5 years. And then the majority, like 80%, believes, but it will be a significant contributor somewhere post 5 years. I think it speaks a bit to the current reality. Do you agree with that? And are there pockets in Europe or specific countries where you think it may contribute much more significantly soon? So firstly, do you agree with that sort of audience view? And secondly, but are there exceptions to that in your mind?
I am completely in line with the audience view, and I'm worried that I somehow influenced the pool with my presentation, because well, it's exactly the point that I wanted to stress. At the same time, I would say, what are the factors that can generate different scenarios country by country in terms of time horizon? For sure, subsidies. If there is a generous subsidy that fills the gap with gray hydrogen or even with natural gas, there can be a speed up of the installed capacity and the applications because of that. Without that, the right answer is exactly what is coming out of the pool, and I would say this is going to be the same answer across all the countries.
So is the flip side of subsidies carbon tax, emission costs? I mean, would
Absolutely.
that be?
These are completely alternative. To be very honest, because of the size of the gap, working only on the CO2 taxes would imply an extremely high increase that is probably not bearable by the market of that. So probably it's going to be a combination of CO2 cost, subsidies, and some CapEx grant in order to contribute to the business case.
I'm going to wrap it up with the last question from Claude Eli. How critical is storage infrastructure to the hydrogen supply chain? And do you have views on what is the best hydrogen storage solution?
Have you said storage? Did I get it correct?
Yes,
storage. So, yeah. I mean, all the value chain across in between the production and the consumption needs to be developed. Storage is something that is needed in order to satisfy the business model of off-site production with large production sites that are gonna manage. I don't have specific experience on how competitive or how mature is storage technology. The only thing I know for transportation is that it's becoming more and more secure. There have been very bad stories about the risk of storing hydrogen that seems to be now manageable, but unfortunately, very limited experience from my side to share on that.
Oh, thank you very much. So as a mainly South African audience, lots of mining companies totally dependent on a state-owned enterprise that are inefficiently generating dirty electricity for us. Is this something we as a country should be serious about as South Africa? Should the government be leading the way? Should we get subsidies? I mean, just speak to the president of the country for 20 seconds.
Definitely is a kind of thing that needs to have a coordination from the government in order to orchestrate money spent in the best way. But is my strong suggestion to do so, because the future of other countries will go in that direction, and being first mover will generate a benefit for the competitiveness of the local companies.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation.
It has been a pleasure, and have a good continuation to all of you.
Thank you.